You dream about your friend's marriage falling apart 6 weeks before they even start fighting. The images are so vivid, you wake up feeling their future heartbreak in your chest. You sit across from your coworker during lunch and suddenly know, with terrifying certainty, that they'll be fired within 2 months. When you try to hint at it, they laugh and say they just got promoted. You walk into family gatherings and immediately see which relationships will implode by Christmas. Your aunt's perfect marriage, you can feel the divorce papers being filed 8 months from now. Your cousin's new business venture, you watch them celebrate the launch while seeing exactly how it will collapse in 18 weeks. 3 days later, your intuition proves right. Again. You avoid looking directly at people because their future pain hits you like a physical blow. You've learned to wear sunglasses indoors, not because you're trying to look cool, but because eye contact opens a floodgate of information you never asked to receive. If this sounds familiar, Arthur Schopenhauer discovered why this isn't a gift, it's what he called the most dangerous curse a conscious mind could possess. You don't just sense what people are feeling now, you see the emotional earthquakes coming before the first crack appears. You don't just observe their current struggles, you experience their future breakdowns weeks before they happen. You don't just live your own life, you're forced to witness the tragic arc of everyone around you while pretending you have no idea what's coming. Schopenhauer spent decades studying what he called temporal will perception, the ability to see how the blind force driving human behavior will play out across time. And he discovered that those cursed with this perception face 3 devastating stages that either destroy them completely or forge them into something beyond ordinary human consciousness. But here's what nobody tells you about seeing the future. While everyone else gets to live moment by moment, discovering life as it unfolds, you're trapped watching the same tragic patterns repeat with clockwork precision. You see your friend making the exact decision that will ruin their career 4 months from now. You watch your family member choose the relationship that will devastate them by next spring. You observe strangers on the street carrying burdens they won't even acknowledge for another 6 weeks. And the worst part? You can't change any of it. Warning people only makes you look crazy. Trying to prevent what you see only convinces them you're paranoid. So you learn to stay silent while watching everyone you care about walk straight into the disasters you can see from miles away. You become what Schopenhauer called a prisoner of future knowledge, cursed to witness the suffering that hasn't happened yet while pretending to be surprised when it finally arrives. Last Tuesday, you had that dream again, the one where your neighbor's teenage son gets into the accident. You woke up knowing it will happen on a rainy Thursday 3 weeks from now at exactly 4:47 p.m. You've seen the intersection. You know which car will run the red light. You even know what song will be playing on his radio. But what can you do? Call him and say you had a prophetic dream? Tell his parents their son is in danger based on something that only exists in your mind? You've tried that before. You know how it ends. So you carry the weight of future tragedies while everyone around you lives in blissful ignorance of what's coming. And that weight, Schopenhauer discovered, is enough to crush most minds that try to bear it. Today we're going beyond surface-level philosophy. We're exploring Schopenhauer's brutal observations about why people cursed with temporal perception often break completely, and the 3 stages every future seer must navigate to survive their own gift. More importantly, we're exploring what Schopenhauer called the only path to freedom, not through suppressing your visions, but through mastering what he termed prophetic detachment, the ability to see what's coming without being destroyed by the knowledge. Because the difference between being crushed by your foresight and mastering it isn't about learning to see less, it's about learning to witness the future without drowning in the helplessness of knowing what can't be changed.
Stage 1. The Awakening. When knowing the future feels like power. Stage 1 usually hits like a lightning strike to consciousness. Maybe you're 16 and you suddenly realize that those random thoughts about people aren't random at all. They're previews of coming attractions. Maybe you're 28 and you finally understand why you've always avoided certain people at certain times. Your subconscious was seeing accidents that hadn't happened yet. This is what Schopenhauer called penetrating the temporal veil. That moment when you first understand that your mind can access information that technically doesn't exist yet. And initially, it feels like the ultimate superpower. You predict your sister's pregnancy 3 months before she knows she's pregnant. You see your friend's job interview disaster 2 weeks before they even apply. You dream about your grandfather's heart attack 5 days before it happens, down to the exact time and the shirt he'll be wearing. At first you think everyone can do this. You casually mention to your friend that they should avoid driving next Thursday around 3 p.m. because something feels wrong about that timing. When they look at you like you've spoken in ancient Greek, you realize this ability might not be as common as you thought it was. Schopenhauer described meeting individuals who told him they could see what he called the will's future manifestations, the way the blind driving force of existence would express itself through upcoming events, relationships, and disasters. But here's what happens in stage 1 that Schopenhauer considered the first danger. You start to develop what he called temporal arrogance. Because your predictions keep proving accurate, you begin to see yourself as somehow above normal human limitations. Why worry about daily concerns when you can see how everything will unfold? Why invest in relationships when you can see exactly when and how they'll end? Why make plans when you already know which ones will succeed and which ones will fail? You start living more in the future than in the present. You become what Schopenhauer described as temporally displaced, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else, but increasingly disconnected from the actual moment you're living in. And this creates the first crack in your relationships. Friends start feeling uncomfortable around you because you react to things that haven't happened yet. You get sad about breakups that are still 2 months away. You celebrate successes before the person has even taken the actions that will create them. You're so weird, they say. It's like you're living in a different timeline. And they're right, you are. You start learning the first survival skill of the future-seer, pretending to be surprised. You perfect the art of acting shocked when the thing you saw coming 6 weeks ago finally happens. You learn to offer comfort for losses you knew were coming before the person even met the relationship that would cause them. But this performance becomes exhausting. You're not just managing your own life, you're managing everyone else's timeline in your head while pretending to exist in their present moment. And this sets up the devastating transition to stage 2, where your gift becomes a source of unbearable psychological torture.
Stage 2. The torment, when future knowledge becomes present hell. Stage 2 is where the gift transforms into what Schopenhauer called temporal hell, being trapped in the knowledge of suffering that hasn't happened yet, while being completely powerless to prevent it. By now, you've learned that sharing your visions only alienates people, but the visions haven't stopped. If anything, they've become more detailed, more frequent, and more devastating. You see your coworker's wife leaving him 7 months from now. You watch the exact conversation where she'll tell him about the affair. You know the date, the restaurant, even what she'll be wearing. But what can you do with this information? You dream about your friend's mother's cancer diagnosis 4 months before the first symptoms appear. You see the doctor's office, hear the exact words the oncologist will use, and feel the temperature of the room where the devastating news will be delivered. This is where Schopenhauer identified 3 specific traps that destroy most people with temporal perception. The first trap is what he called prophetic responsibility. You start believing that because you can see disasters coming, you're somehow responsible for preventing them. You become obsessed with finding ways to change outcomes without revealing your knowledge. You anonymously suggest your friend get a health checkup. You casually mention to your coworker that marriages require constant attention. You invent excuses to keep people away from locations where you've seen accidents happen. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you manage to shift the timeline just enough to prevent what you saw. But most of the time, you learn the horrible truth. The future has a momentum that individual actions rarely overcome. And when the disasters happen exactly as you foresaw them, you carry not just the grief of witnessing them, but the crushing guilt of wondering if you could have done more. The second trap is what Schopenhauer called temporal contamination. You start absorbing not just current emotions from people around you, but their future emotional states as well. You look at your happy friend and suddenly feel the depression that will hit them next spring when their career falls apart. You hug your cheerful neighbor while experiencing the grief they'll feel when their dog dies next winter. You're living everyone's future trauma in the present moment. You carry next year's heartbreaks in today's conversations. You feel tomorrow's losses during tonight's celebrations. One person perfectly captured this. I can feel what's going to happen to people before they know it themselves, and it's like carrying everyone's future pain in my chest all the time. And this is where you face Schopenhauer's crucial choice. You can surrender to the knowledge and let it consume your ability to live in the present. Or you can begin the difficult work of what he called prophetic integration, learning to see the future without being imprisoned by it.
Stage 3 is where true transformation becomes possible. It's where you learn to be what Schopenhauer called a conscious temporal witness, someone who can see across time without being destroyed by the knowledge. This is where you discover that your foresight, properly integrated, isn't a curse. It's access to a level of wisdom about the nature of existence that can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Schopenhauer believed that those who master temporal perception don't just survive their gift, they become what he called temporal artists, who can use their knowledge to create beauty, wisdom, and healing in the present moment. But mastery requires 3 specific practices that Schopenhauer developed through his philosophical work. The first practice is what Schopenhauer called present moment anchoring. This involves deliberately cultivating your ability to exist fully in the current moment, despite your knowledge of future events. Schopenhauer noticed that people with temporal perception often become chronologically homeless, unable to inhabit any timeline fully. You're so aware of what's coming that you forget to live what's here. The anchoring practice means daily connection with immediate sensory experience. This might mean meditation focused entirely on breath, touch, and physical sensation. Cooking where you attend only to flavors and textures happening right now. Walking where you practice seeing the present beauty without interpreting its future significance. As one person discovered, I found relief through meditation and observation of the minuscule. If I feel overwhelmed, I can go stare at the structure of a plant and ponder its characteristics. But here's the key. You're not trying to suppress your temporal awareness. You're creating what Schopenhauer called islands of nowness, where you can exist as someone experiencing life in real time, not as a cosmic preview viewer. The second practice is learning to transform your foresight into what Schopenhauer called temporal art. This means finding ways to use your knowledge of future patterns to create beauty, wisdom, or healing in the present moment without revealing the prophetic source. Most future-seers keep their knowledge trapped inside because they don't know how to share insights without sounding insane. But integration requires learning to translate temporal perception into present moment guidance that helps others without overwhelming them. For some, this means creative expression, writing stories that somehow prepare people for challenges they don't know are coming, creating art that captures the emotional truth of experiences before they happen. For others, it means intuitive guidance, becoming the friend who always seems to know exactly what someone needs to hear, the counselor whose advice somehow perfectly addresses problems that haven't fully emerged yet. One person found their path. I leaned into it and became a psychic healer. It's still tough in my personal life, but I've learned to channel the information constructively. The key is finding your unique way of translating future knowledge into present wisdom. Schopenhauer himself did this through philosophy. He took his temporal awareness of human suffering and transformed it into timeless insights about the nature of existence. The third practice is the most crucial, developing what Schopenhauer called prophetic detachment. This is the ability to see future events without taking emotional responsibility for them. Most temporal perceivers swing between two extremes: complete emotional absorption in future events or complete shutdown to avoid the pain of knowing. Integration requires finding what Schopenhauer called the middle path of temporal wisdom. This means learning to witness future suffering with what he called compassionate detachment. You can see someone's upcoming heartbreak without absorbing it into your own emotional system. You can know about coming disasters without carrying the weight of preventing them. You develop what Schopenhauer called temporal boundaries, the ability to receive prophetic information when it serves a purpose and release it when it doesn't. You learn that seeing the future doesn't make you responsible for changing it. When these three practices combine, something extraordinary happens. Your temporal perception transforms from a burden into what Schopenhauer considered one of the highest human capacities: the ability to exist simultaneously across multiple timelines without being trapped in any of them. You become what he called a temporal bridge, someone who can access the wisdom of future patterns, but also live with full presence, create beauty in the moment, and find meaning in the unfolding of time itself. You discover that your foresight, properly integrated, allows you to offer a rare gift: the ability to help people prepare for challenges they can't see coming, not through predictions that would terrify them, but through present-moment guidance that strengthens them for whatever lies ahead. And perhaps most importantly, you find what Schopenhauer called temporal peace, the ability to see the future without being overwhelmed by it, to carry knowledge without being crushed by responsibility, to witness time's unfolding with wisdom rather than terror. If you've recognized yourself in this journey, know that Schopenhauer believed your temporal perception serves a crucial purpose. In a world increasingly disconnected from the deeper patterns of existence, we need people who can see across time and translate that vision into present-moment wisdom. Your foresight isn't a burden to be endured. It's access to a level of temporal reality that most people never experience. And that access, when properly integrated, becomes a source of profound service to human understanding. Which stage of temporal perception resonates most with your experience? Share in the comments below, because as one future seer beautifully said, the path of integration is easier when we walk it together, when we know we're not the only one carrying the weight of seeing what's coming.